all scholars of English literature, language and grammar. You are listening concept of literature. Popularly, literature means anything that is printed in a book. But actually, literature means that which is of universal interest to man. What applies to a local or professional or merely personal interest will not belong to literature. Charles Lamb went to the extreme of excluding the works of Gibbon, Hume, and Flavius Josephus, together with directories and almanacs. Hallam comprised jurisprudence, theology, and medicine under the general head of literature. Both the points of view are wrong. Literature is composed of those books which, by reason of their subject matter and style, are of general human interest. Literature is mainly mean for giving pleasure. The weekly sermons of Christianity, which have extensive influence on the popular mind, do not belong to literature. While Shakespeare's drama on Greek drama is literature because it fulfills the primary function of aesthetic satisfaction by reason of its subject matter and the manner of treatment. Literature, whether it imparts knowledge of not, is of lasting human significance because it continues to appeal to man for its subject matter of enduring interest and the attractive mode of treatment. So, in judging the merit of a piece of literature, both matter and manner have to be taken into account. Fundamentally, literature is the representation of life through the medium of language. It is, however, not an exact replica of life. It is an interpretation of life as life shapes itself in the mind of the writer. Thus, the imagination of the writer is an important factor. Presentation of life that literature offers can appeal to a particular class of readers, but literature yields aesthetic pleasure and appeals to people of all ages and climes. It lives by virtue of the life which it embodies and the way in which it is presented. There is no real consensus or one all-embracing definition of the term literature. Most of the definitions of literature are given by scholars according to their subjective experience and their context. Some scholars have defined it in broad sense as anything that is written. Rees sees it in the narrow sense of writing, which expresses and communicates thought, feelings, and attitudes towards life. The broad definition of literature appears to be vague and amorphous in that it includes works that are not literature per se, like works in field of education, biology, history, and a host of others by virtue of the fact that they are written. However, they cannot qualify as real literature. The narrow definition delineates literature from its general purview to what can be called literature as a subject of study. A pursuit of some more definitions will provide a clear light on the real nature of literature. According to Moody, literature springs from our inborn love of telling a story, of arranging words in pleasing patterns, of expression in words, some special aspects of our human experience. Milton defines literature from functional perspective as the imaginative work that gives us 4 R's: recreation, recognition, revelation, and redemption. Rees described literature as the permanent expression in words of some thought or feelings, in ideas about life and the world. An analysis of these definitions reveals that certain things are common to all the definitions. These are recognized the fact that literature is imaginative, literature expresses thoughts and feelings, literature deals with life experiences, literature uses words in a powerful, effective, and yet captivating manner. Literature promotes recreation and revelation of hidden facts. Literature can thus be summed up as permanent expressions in words, especially arranged in pleasing accepted pattern or forms carrying thoughts, feelings, ideas, or other special aspects of human experiences. D. Quincy distinguishes 2 types of literature. The distinction between the two types depends upon the difference of function which they fulfill. The literature of knowledge is meant for teaching, while the literature of power has the function is moving and inspiring the readers. The literature of knowledge appeals to the reasoning faculties, while the literature of power appeals to higher understanding through the emotions of pleasure and sympathy. Ultimately, it makes for wisdom, but it works through human passions and genial emotions. Literature of knowledge gives us information which is new, but literature of power gives us information which is new, but literature of power gives us the highest truth which is eternal. The literature of knowledge has a provisional appeal, but the literature of power has a permanent interest. The principle of Isaac Newton, which was revolutionary in the matter of giving information, had to give way to other books which appeared with newer knowledge and more fresh information. The appeal of this book was destroyed in the course of time. On the contrary, the Iliad, the Prometheus of Aeschylus, King Lear, and Paradise Lost are eternal in their appeal. They remain unique and distinct. There, this uniqueness, this permanence of appeal is the first and foremost quality of a piece of literature. Literature deals with life as it is seen and experienced by the individual writer. It may be described as imaginative instruction of life. It is from it is form of art, and as such imagination plays a vital part in the presentation of life in literature. It has been rightly said, personal experience is the basis of all real literature. Aristotle hits the mark in his use of the word mimesis. He stresses the representation of universal patterns of human behavior and of an action embodying these. Moreover, an artist has to shape his plot or structure of emotions and events as the case may be. He is a creator, and his creative activity lies as much in his imaginative selection of life as in his rendering the same with the help of linguistic tools. Thus, the term literature is limited to imaginative literature, poetry, drama, function, etc., fiction, etc. It yields aesthetic pleasure by reason of its eternal appeal of subject matter and style. It treats of personal reading of life, but it is elevated to a work of universal interest by virtue of its mode of treatment. Its language is connotative and evocative rather than referential and demonstrative. It creates an atmosphere of mind through the use of metaphors, images, meter, alliteration, and patterns of sound. It takes the readers into an innate and intimate and profound sense of things through various suggestions, nuances, and resonances. This explains why literature, like other forms of art, affects us subtly and profoundly. In lyric, drama, epic, and the novel, the reference is to a world of imagination and of fiction. The statement in a novel, in a poem, or in drama are not literally true. There is a central and important difference between a statement in a novel by Balzac or even in a historical novel and the statement in a book of history or sociology. Even in the subjective lyric, that I of the poet is a fictional dramatic. I, time and space in a novel are not those of real life. The dramatist or the novelist creates his own structure of events according to the law of probability. Even an apparently most realistic drama or novel, the very slice of life is constructed according to certain artistic conventions. Thus, literary artists observe certain conventions which impose an order and organization on their works, and which live the works out of the matter-of-fact statements of the word of reality. Fictionally, or imagination is another distinguishing trait of literature, and this is evident as much in the selection of life as in the organization of that life in the work. In these respects, Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, Keats, Rabindranath Tagore are different from Cicero, Montaigne, Emerson, Gibbon, Hume, etc. Gibbon's decline and fall of Roman Empire or Burke's speech on America have good style and general force of presentation. But they do not create a fictional world, nor do they use imaginative qualities of suggestive language. In short, their words do not provide the aesthetic satisfaction by taking the readers into a fictional world of joys and sorrows. In all forms of literature, there is an expression of the writer's own vision, his own sense of fact, his one intellectual and emotional reaction to men and things. History, economics, philosophy, science are all objective presentation in which the writer's own sense of fact is rigidly kept out. The writer's vision shapes the work of literature and it becomes a thing of beauty, of vision, of its exquisite mode of presentation and expression. The personal vision becomes a thing of eternal interest by virtue of the manner of treatment. Thus, in a work of literature, both matter and manner are important. If it deals with any subject trivial and rare, it cannot evoke the response of the readers. Again, if its treatment is commonplace and banal, it cannot attract the readers. Again, if its treatment is commonplace and banal, it cannot attract the readers. The human value of a work of art depends upon the nature of its theme. A poem, however well written on a trivial subject like a pair of scissors, cannot be as interesting as one on the fall of man or on the ingratitude of human beings. A Paradise Lost or King Lear cannot be written on the death of a lapdog or the glide of an aeroplane. It is not always lofty theme or elevated thought that is important in a work of literature. It is the range and intensity of experiences that determine the place of the writer. King Lear is built on the commonplace, on the common theme of the ingratitude of water. Othello is a drama of jealousy, but they become immortal creations because they fathom the depth of human experiences and carry out rich suggestions about eternal truths of life. Novel of Dostoevsky or Hardy stirs the depths of human heart, human heat, because it renders enduring fact of life a moving language and picture. Keats Ode to Autumn or Ode to a Nightingale is no mere objective rendering of nature's beauty. It appeals to the human heart for its imaginative surrender to nature and for its beautiful images and melody. Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey is a great poem in that Davy's leisure because of deeper significance and greater suggestiveness. Wizardry of sounds or sheer music of wizardry of sounds or sheer music does not make good poetry, just as lofty thoughts alone do not make good drama or a good poem. It is the harmonious combination of thought and style that gives rise to good literature. Keats is a greater poet than Swinburne because Keats aims at complete satisfaction. Shakespeare is a greater dramatist than Shaw because Shakespeare gives the eternal verity of life. Hardy is a greater novelist than Dickens because he takes us to the deeper depth of life. Greatness of an artist is determined by the richness and intensity of moments in life. A great work of art takes the readers to the very heart of truth and is therefore eternally true. It does not deal with what is Keats is right when he says, beauty is truth, truth is beauty. Literature is a vital record of what men have seen in life, what they have experienced of it, what they have thought and felt about those aspects of it which have the most immediate and enduring interest for all of us. It is the interpretation of life, and life shapes itself in the mind of the interpreter. We care for literature because we care for life, because we are interested in it to know how men and women live life and think about life. Pleasure and profit are the two motives of the reading of literature. Literature is sweet and useful. This is the Horatian formula of Bull's and Utile. All art is sweet and useful to the appropriate users. What is articulates is superior to the self-introduced reflections of the readers, and it gives them pleasure by the skill with which it articulates. But the pleasure of literature is higher pleasure because it is pleasure in a higher kind of activity, that is non-acquisitive contemplation, and the utility, the seriousness, the instructiveness of literature is a pleasurable seriousness, that is, note the seriousness of a duty which must be done or of a lesson to be learned, but an aesthetic seriousness, a seriousness of perception. Emerson says, beauty is its own for being, apart from any useful value of literature, which is stressed by the utilitarians and moralists. Literature mainly appeals to us for the beautiful forms it creates. The good writer ushers man into a world of beauty and joy away from the harsh reality of everyday existence. By nature, man is a dreamer of happy dreams, a creator of unsubstantial visions. He feels happy when he is taken into the fictitious world of men and women suffering, struggling, and enjoying also. He finds fictional characters realizing their dreams and desires, and he gets the pleasure of wish fulfillment. Even tragedy pleases him because in tragedy there is an artistic conquest of sorrow, of the sorrow and pain of real life. It is not, however, true to say that literature makes us forget the problems of real life. We see in literature the problems of life in broader perspective of real life. We see in literature the problems of life in broader perspective. Literature enlarges our sympathies, and the pleasure is derived from the amplification of experience and enlargement of sympathies. Romantic literature is a reflection of the deepest aspirations of men, which are more real than the actual living of men and women. We are attracted to Keats' Ode to Nightingale or Shelley's Ode to a Skylark because it expresses our deepest desires and emancipates us from the prison of actuality. Literature is a form of knowledge. Aristotle had seemed to say something like this in this famous dictum that poetry is more philosophical than history. But the prime office of a writer is not to discover and communicate knowledge. His real function is to make us perceive what we see, imagine what we already conceptually or practically know. Imaginative literature is a fiction, an artistic verbal imitation of life. Aristotle called this mimesis. It imitates the universals, which include the marvels. Imaginative writers are discoverers of new perceptual values or new aesthetic qualities in the things existing in reality. The pleasures of literature are thus derived from the discovery of these aesthetic qualities. Keats, in his poem on reading Chapman's Homer, says great poetry reveals to him a new realm. It is rediscovery of life. The reading of literature may be profitable only when it is done properly. Literature is a complex organism and it is necessary for the readers to probe into it. A careful reading of the play Hamlet will reveal various thematic elements and how they are related at the same time, the glorious intricacy of the design. The best literature is carefully written records of the kinds of experience that men have found significant, and literature that has endured has done so because men in different generations and in a variety of circumstances have felt that significance. Literature as vicarious experience has one great advantage. The imaginative reader can live in words attainable in no other way. We can discover what it means to a young man who has been betrayed by his mother's poor hasty marriage to his father's murderer, or what it means to be obsessed by a white whale that has come to symbolize all of the arbitrary and hostile forces in the whale's universe. Moby, Moby Dick. Literature is designed to point out the significance of experience. Reading Moby Dick may be vicarious experience, but it is experience in which every detail has been calculated to have maximum significance. The experience that grows with the careful but imaginative reading of a literary work is organized to produce the greatest possible impact. W.K. Wimsatt once defined a poem as a feat of style by which a complex meaning is handled all at once. This definition is true of all worthwhile literature with certain qualifications. The problem for the reader is to understand the full complexity of the meaning, that is, to experience as fully as possible the total work. Here, literary criticism may help the readers to a considerable extent to read the work properly and in a worthwhile manner. Genres of literary means kind, sort or style. The term is used in literary discourse to denote types or classes of literature. For example, poetry, fiction, and drama. Literary genre follows certain common compositions which distinguish it from another literary genre. Definable conventions which prevent readers from mistaking it for another genre. What is poetry? Poetry is the oldest of the three major forms of literature with roots deep in the rituals and religious observance of antiquity. Hence, it was primarily oral, performance oriented, and public as it was, more often than not, a tool for supplication, communal tribal celebration, and celebration of the supernatural, as well as appreciation of the gifts of nature. From these early forms developed the personal and impersonal forms of poetry, represented by the lyric on the one hand and the traditional epic and ballad on the other. As we will deal with forms of poetry in more detail in later units, we shall now move on to explicate the distinguishing characteristics of poetry, namely imagery, sound, rhythm, and diction. Irrespective of the distinguishing qualities, poetry as a form of literary expression embodies all the defining qualities of literature, such as imagination, creativity, suggestiveness or indirection, and as a mirror reflecting the individual's perception of the world. These poetical and literary qualities apply to both oral and written forms of poetry, except that the medium of expression and transmission are different. Nevertheless, both the manifestations of poetry share identical content, form, and effect. In other words, the obvious difference between these forms of poetry, their sources and end purpose, are the emotions and imagination of the writer on the one hand and the reader or audience on the other. They convey significant truths about the human condition and they employ a language that is deliberately adorned by the use of figurative expressions. A pursuit of the above definitions make it clear that there cannot be a single definition that will be comprehensive enough to accommodate the various shades of opinions and schools of thought regarding the exact nature of the genre. We cannot say that one definition is superior, better, or more comprehensive or authoritative than another. However, we can certainly say that each of them has its point of emphasis, which in turn places it in or the other of the great literary debate over content, style, and effect. It is apparent that poets' idea of poetry, as stated above, emphasizes style or form over content and effect, while on the other hand, both Wordsworth and Robinson focus more attention on content and effect in their definitions. Further, we should note the recurrence of some common words and phrases such as emotions, feelings, rhythm, rhythmical, truth, pleasure, imaginative expression, language, etc., which underscore the protein nature of poetry and which make it susceptible to being conceived of variously by definers, the way the proverbial blind man saw and defined the elephant. To sum up all that, now we will distinguish poetry from the other content of a poem or seeing the images or pictures right before us. The word rhythm is derived from the Greek word which translates in English into flow as one of the elements of poetry. It is considered as the most important of a poet's technical resources. According to Reeves, rhythm a is a form of repetition, the repetition of a particular pattern of light and heavy syllables, whereas Brahms defines it as a recognizable though variable pattern in the beat of the stresses in the stream of sound. Sound is the third distinguishing feature of poetry. Along with rhythm, it constitutes the foundation of the musical quality that is associated with poetry as a form of literature. Its functions in a poem are similar to those of rhythm. The significance of a sound in a poem can be better appreciated when the poem is read aloud. The sound qualities of a poem are also experienced when read silently through the mind's ear. When efficiently deployed in a poem, sound effects enable the reader or audience to obtain a state of mind in which he can more easily appreciate the emotions and meanings conveyed in the poem by the writer. According to Hees and Lewton, much of the delight to be derived from the reading of poetry stems from the pleasure experienced in contemplating patterns which are not only decorative but significant. Diction refers to the peculiar choice of words used by the poet or his vocabulary. In the words of Abrahams, the selection of words in a work of literature. A writer's diction can be analyzed under such categories as the degree to which his vocabulary is abstract or concrete, Latinate or Anglo-Saxon in origin, colloquial or formal, technical or common, literal or figurative. The diction of a poem indicates the interest, habits of mind, and the period of the poet. A poet's diction can also be described as plain or ornate, homely or exotic, contemporary or archaic, familiar or cryptic, etc. What is fiction? Let us discuss fiction. The word prose refers to the ordinary or everyday use of language and is derived from the Latin word prosa, which literally means straightforward. It basically means saying something in a straightforward way and not in a poetic way. Thus, what we speak and write for our ordinary purposes in a straightforward manner without any embellishment and regard for diction, imagery, sound and rhythm is prose. Fiction comes from the Latin word fictum, which means created. Fiction is a term used to denote anything, mainly stories or accounts that are imagined and are not real. Hence, fairy tales or other stories that our mother or grandmother used to tell us about animals, monsters, or even human beings that existed in far away countries are fictional narratives. Thus, fiction is therefore any form of narrative which deals in part or in whole with events that are not factual but rather are imaginary and invented by its author. Both poetry and prose can be fictional or factional. However, the word fiction usually refers to prose fiction, that is, fiction written in neither prose nor poetry. Now we have discussed the term prose and fiction. Prose fiction refers literary works which are fictional and are presented in a narrative form. Fiction and narrative are words that distinguish prose fiction from any other form of narrative or fictional work. For example, drama is fiction, but it is presented in dialogue and enacted on the stage and not narrated. The genre of prose fiction consists of the short story, the novella, and the novel. In the words of Frank Kermode, a prose fiction is a literary work that has a personal narrative, a hero to identify with fictional inventions, style, and suspense. In short, anything that might be handled with the rather personal ventures of creativity and artistic freedom. Prose fiction may exaggerate, prose fiction may exaggerate or distort facts, or the story may be completely an invention of the writer. It depends on the style of the writer and or what the writer wants to achieve. Although, although the story in prose fiction is invented by the writer, it is presented in a realistic manner. Usually, prose fiction treats essentially personal subject matter, which is open to various interpretations by the reader. What we read in prose fiction are events, incidents, and experiences that affect human beings. It relays human experience from the writer's imagination and is seen as a field of cultural significance to be explored with a critical and detective interest in the subjective perceptions both of artists and their readers. The origin of modern prose fiction in its present form, particularly the novel, is traced to the development of letter writing, which is associated with elegance and style. They included an amalgam of genres that included history and science in vernaculars, personal memories, fiction and poetry. Gradually, prose fiction in this wider spectrum soon became a prominent medium for the creation of a distinct style of writing and communication. The style gave the artist an opportunity for artistic experimentation and originally needed to exhibit and market his or her style. The reading of prose fiction later became fashionable and it remained close to everyday language. Prose fiction and history. What is prose fiction and what is history? There is a marked similarity between prose fiction and historical narratives, as both present human experiences. However, it is important to notice the relationship between the two. Both are narrative projects, but history is based on actual events and real names of the participants. Actual dates and places are mentioned. History is therefore an empirical social experience because the historian is concerned with empirical data, operating as much as possible at the level of facts in the pursuit of specific truths. It is a factual documentation with the sole aim of education and preservation of posterity. Early historians could include inventions in the factual account as long as they were rooted in traditional knowledge or in order to orchestrate a certain passage. To the contrary, the literary artist is concerned with historical data as long as they provide him with the experiences he intends to present in his art. However, the language of the literary artist does not subsist on hard facts. He mediates facts in a pursuit of both specific and universal truths, while trying to please in the process. In the words of Chidi Amuta, the literary artist is faced with the problems of disciplining history to obey artistic purpose. There is a difference between the depiction of historians and novelists. Novelists depict the social, political, and personal realities of a place and proud with clarity and details more than historians. History is actual documentation, while prose fiction is a work of art. Prose fiction can very well be based on history, but the author uses vivid and graphic representations of characters and incidents to present an entertaining story. Authors of prose fiction, like historians, could document and present facts, but not as accurately as the historians, because whereas historians present real names of the people involved, places and dates, in prose fiction real names are not used, though non-places and dates could be mentioned. This means that historical event could be presented in prose fiction, but the writer manipulates the story in an artistically satisfying manner. The writer here uses fictitious names to avoid litigation. In many works of prose fiction, the author publishers indicates that the names are fictitious and degrades the resemblance of any known person. Thank you, brothers. Thank you, sisters, for providing your valuable time while listening the truth of science to spirituality, language to literature, power of the word, how word has power to recreate, regenerate and reoperate our dead cells to active. It is possible by doing yoga, pranayam, meditation daily. It is said, it is observed, examined, evaluated by all the scientists, medical science, spiritual studies, that our morning time between 2 to 5 is the most gracious and blessed time for everyone to keep himself away from all the diseases, illnesses, deficiencies of the human body. So dear friends, nature is the common concept, and this nature teaches us different languages spontaneously and naturally. Thank you for attending this important speech. Nice to see all of you. Thank you.